And now we have Mário Salimon, which is, he will bring a very important part of this process, which is the transgenerational dialogue. Please, Mário. Yeah, please. Cadê o... Dá o microfone para ele.
Nice to share this with you. Thank you. It's more because we're talking about all these discussions about economics, agriculture, and here in Norway, it's something that is very important, that farmers and the people, they trust in the university. No, somehow the farmers, they respect, of course, when they come to the university, they ask for some help. There's this good connection between farmers, population in general, and the university. And I believe that in Brazil, I don't feel this sometimes. For example, that the industry, they trust in the opinion of the university. I don't know if I'm wrong, but when I was in Brazil, it was just my feeling, you know, that to create this dialogue between industry, university, sometimes very difficult in Brazil. And it's just my comment. Maybe you can just comment again.
A very short comment as well. Thank you, Fernando. Very short comment about José Osvaldo's presentation and André as well. It's almost a consensus that we need public policies to transform the wealth in Amazon into income to its people. But I'll give some bad news. We need to be very creative in these new public policies. We don't have this abundance of cash we had in the past. Not only in Brazil, even in Germany, they are discussing this ceiling for the public budget, even in Germany. We have now pensions, we have transfers to people, income guarantees, and the money is out. So we need to be very creative in this new public. We need a lot of partnership with companies. We need to see other ways to fund these policies. That's the bad news.
Can you comment
that? Okay, Mário, please.
It's indeed a great pleasure for me to be here with you today, and it's also an honor to have been invited by Fórum do Futuro to participate in this very important moment. I was an exchange student in 1982 in the United States. It was a Rotary program, and then I understood the importance of going around and talking to people. So this window of opportunity that I had walking around Oslo, talking to some people, being here with you, meeting you, it's very relevant in my life. I'm going to be 60 next year, and it's still very nice for me to learn new things and to be with different people in different places. I would like to congratulate Fernando in the name of the Fórum do Futuro, Siqueira, also this year. It's a very important organization, and it's very nice for me to contribute with whichever knowledge that I have that would be useful. So this talk here today stems from a very interesting situation. Fórum do Futuro has negotiated and obtained money from the World Bank for us to develop the seed to a very interesting organization, which would be a node, which would be, we call it pole, in Sinop, in Mato Grosso, so that we could demonstrate the relevance of the ideas that have been developed after everything that has been said and done by Alisson Paulinelli and his team and the people who came after him. So we went out to form a task force, and we wanted to be as diverse as possible. So we talked to the third sector, we talked to universities, we talked to many people from environmental organizations, from government people, businesses, trying to build this very diverse workforce, and we had a hard time. Little did we know that we were not prepared to summon these people, as you said, to convocar. You have that in your presentation. It was very good. And the third sector rejected us. Some of them started to talk with us, but left very soon in the process. And we had to resort to the universities in Mato Grosso in order to become a channel and bring information from indigenous communities, the people who live by the rivers. We managed to do very relevant work, but it was difficult. And we had a chagrin because of that. We were sad. So Fernando challenged me to write about the problem of intergenerational communication. And it's something that is very, I cannot do that alone. So I started talking to my family, my children. They're not children anymore. My son is 30 years old, almost 30 years old. Gabriela, my daughter-in-law, is also almost 30 years old. My daughter, Ana Paula, is 25, and Marina is 22. And also my wife who supported me throughout the whole process. We've been talking about this for a long time. And even yesterday, I was talking to people, and it made me change my presentation a little bit. So I would like to thank them for helping me. This was very, very important. It took a while for them to catch up with the situation. They did not want to talk to me in the beginning. I had to write over and over and ask and ask. They were reticent, but in the end, they gave their contribution, and I wouldn't have done the article you see in the book without them. You see that person over there? Guess who that guy is? Yours truly. I was a punk rocker in the 1980s. And after that, I was a pioneer in rap music in Brazil. I was one of the first people to do rap music in the hip hop and electronic music and all that. I still have a career as a musician, and that guy still lives inside of me. At times, that rebel is very, very strong inside me. Fernando knows that. Yeah. And this is to show you that when you talk about young and old, it's all very relative. So the things that I'm going to say here are relative to certain situations that are not absolute, all right? But they're relevant as far as speculations are concerned, and they're important at the moment. We're dealing with meta-knowledge. We're trying to obtain knowledge about knowledge, so it's a good start. That guy is going to talk to you also. What we're trying to do is discuss the importance of bridging the gaps that exist for a sustainable future. And then we know that despite all the information that we have, all the technologies and everything, we have had a hard time showing the younger people in Brazil how difficult it has been to obtain democracy, to regain democracy, to provide food for the people, to provide infrastructure, to give them voice, to free the press, and things like that. Everything's taken for granted these days. But even though we've had difficulty dealing with the past, that doesn't mean that we cannot deal with the future. We cannot do that alone. So that's why we've been trying so hard to bring younger people into the process. We had very good conversations with Leonardo yesterday and today, and Isabella, and I think that has instructed me so I can move on thinking about this and taking that into consideration. When we talk about the third leap proposed by Paulinelli, we're talking about a very complex set of interaction and communication needs. When we deal with complexity, things become harder because we need to dismantle it in somehow and make it available for the people. And so we have to reconstruct it again with them so we can have effective communication. So we must address communication difficulties before we can do anything else. For us to build a sustainable future, we need to bridge the communication gap between the generations. We must learn to listen to each other and to collaborate on a more efficient basis. We think we communicate most of the time, but what we're doing generally is that we're exchanging information. So we send information and we receive information, but that doesn't mean that the proper feedback occurs and that we are building indeed common sense. What we need to do in order to communicate and have projects that work is to build common sense. I can never overstate the importance that communication has. It's much more than bilateral transmission of information. This is something that I want us to keep in mind all the time. So the opinion of the receiver about what the sender says is the key for the verification of perception, the feedback that will allow us to understand different worldviews and to be able to have people interacting in the process that we propose. We have a general belief. The first aspect that I have found while discussing while reflecting about the generation gap as far as communication is concerned, right? So technology. We always say that technology is a big problem. That the older people would not be able to deal with technology. That as every new set of software or equipment that comes will make things harder. This has always been a belief for the 20, 30 years because effectively hardware and software have been very difficult to manipulate in the beginning. But now, with the new developments in interfaces, that is not going to be a problem anymore. We think that the design, which is now oriented on user-centered functionality, will solve this sort of problem, and it will be easier for older people to adapt to the new operational systems and the new equipment. So this factor will not be central anymore. But there are other aspects related to technology. It can be indeed a barrier. I was talking to my youngest daughter, Marina. She studied linguistics, and she was telling me that the fact that people live, explore the internet and the digital world makes them create and generate, live in new territories. We're constantly seeing the birth of new territories, and life that is lived within these territories generates new cultures in the plural, and culture affects language, and language is the basis for our communication. We live in a codified world, and if we do not share language, it's very difficult for us to communicate. So this is a barrier which must be taken into consideration. So technology can connect us or can divide us, depending on how we adapt to it. So we need to use it, understand it, but use it properly in order to bridge the gap as far as generations are concerned. We're talking about the fact that it generates a new dialogue. The new territories generate new types of dialogue. And what my other daughter told me, Ana Paula, she's a designer, communication designer, is, Dad, one problem that we have is that we have different backdrops for communication. So when we're talking about a certain subject, you have one backdrop and I have a different one. So we think we're talking about the same thing, but we're not. As you put something in front of a backdrop, it has one meaning. When you use it in front of another backdrop, the meaning will certainly change. So that must be taken into consideration. Somehow we must find ways to equalize the backdrop. So we must interact more. We must have more and better conversations if we want to bridge the gap between the generations. Another problem that we found was that there is a certain pragmatism in adults that makes us colonize the future. We're very much concerned about the future, about having the resources that we need in order to live. So we try to design the future, to colonize it. And this generates a certain rigid structure that is very difficult for the younger people to accept. I know that because I have been there. I used to get really mad when my parents tried to tell me exactly what I had to do, and I had no room for creativity or for being myself. And so we must take that into consideration. The way that we see things is rigid, it's very institutional, it's the way that we've been brought up. I'm not too different from people who are 10 or 20 years older than I am, but my children are very different from me in this aspect. They value freedom in ways that it's not accepted. I mean, I can't even understand. And we have to deal with that if we want to bridge the gaps in terms of intergenerational communication. What happens is that these differences make us closed off to dialogue. Younger people tend, it says, I'm generalizing here, okay? Younger people will tend to cancel us because of the things that we say and how rigid we are. And they will look at us. I used to say that they look at us as if we were last year's iPhone. And it's something that it's incredible, but it's outdated, right? And we tend to look at them as projects, as something that it is yet to be, that it is yet to become. They're like drafts of people. And this is really annoying. I know that because of the way my kids react to me, and I know that because I've also been there. So our future, no matter how important it is, it may be, it should not be shaped by the past. We must find ways of developing something that is really new with these conversations that we have to develop with the younger people. And I'm saying young and old here because I read a lot about it as far as academic texts are concerned, and I thought that there were too many euphemisms, and this is so straightforward. I mean, when you're talking to someone, you're either young or you're old. It's immediate. You look at someone, the way they dress, or the way they talk, or the way they use technology, or they don't use technology. So that's why I'm using that. And I think that we should discuss ways of understanding, of seeing how important it is for us to talk and understand each other so we can build a future that is not necessarily the repetition of the past. We have to at least filter the things that have not worked well, because we tend to repeat. As we colonize the future with the information that we have right now, we're certainly repeating mistakes because we're using structures that have been already tested and are outdated. So we have shifts in power dynamics because after the groundswell that happened in around 2008 with social media platforms, every receptor became a transmitter. This was a huge shift in communication. A huge shift in many aspects because this meant on the one hand democratizing communication, but on the other hand we lost many of the gatekeeping processes that validated information, and science is suffered with that a lot. So we have misinformation right now. That is one of the biggest problems that we have. But anyhow, this groundswell that was represented by the social media platforms that are based on databases, dynamic internet, it made a huge shift in power. So we need new arrangements. We need to talk about this, and we need new arrangements because the way things were before will not work in the future. It's not working right now. We can see that. The only way to keep certain power structures is through some sort of violence, either physical or mental, because we live in a world right now in which we have the freedom and the ability to destroy most of the artificial scarcities that exist. And this is really significant. So the power dynamics have new rules, and the ability to convince and mobilize society to transition towards something new and disruptive always has and always will require a very careful communication strategy. We're seeing that in the Forum of the Future because we have a certain structure and a certain way of thinking, and we know that we cannot impose that. We're giving people the opportunity to discuss things and interact with us. And it's not exactly easy. We need help in order to do that. And I think that talking to all of you has helped us a lot. Anyway, as we can see, there comes a paradox, but we have to deal with it. We need freedom in a way. We need to give word. We need to give space so that the younger people can talk and the older people can talk, and we can all express ourselves. But we also need a certain structure, because if we need to communicate, that means that we need some sort of code or a set of codes, a platform, a backdrop, and all this must be negotiated, and it becomes some sort of structure. So we need to both be flexible and structured. That is not exactly easy, but it's something that we have to face. We have to understand, and we have to build together. So we need flexibility to have dialogue, but we need structure to advance, because we live in a very institutionalized world. In order to obtain money, in order to obtain resources, we need structure. So we have to find ways of breaking the stereotypes together and evolve, because having this stereotype mind generates what my daughter-in-law Gabriela said. Adults tend to see the cup half empty. And younger people come to us with ideas, and we're always looking at the problems of what they bring, about what the problems that are inherent to what they bring. We have a certain difficulty in seeing. Sometimes we marvel with the skin, the veneer of the ideas, but we don't go deep enough into them when we try to criticizing whatever comes, because we tend to see the cup half empty and not half full. So young and old must move past these stereotypes if we want real dialogue. But we have to move out of cancellation, and we have to move out of looking at younger people as drafts. The older people, we're not outdated or unfinished. We're evolving together somehow. We're evolving together. We're part of a continuum. If we look at it, we have all been very young, and luckily, fortunately, we'll be very old for a long time and healthy. My son, Luis, said something that was very interesting when I asked him about the difficulties in communication that he had with me and with his mother, which has passed. And he said, I recognize we have had difficulties, but the fact that you always had us spending time with my uncles, grandmothers and grandmother, with older people, made me understand them, and it's easier for me. I see things differently than my sisters. I think it's easier for me to be around older people because I have spent time with them, and I look at this experience as something that has been affectionate. So I think that affection and understanding and caring is the way that we can accept being together and talking and discussing things in a way that will propel us forward. Affection builds the strongest bridges. So I would like to conclude saying that if we are to build sustainable future projects, we need to enable, perfect, and amplify intergenerational dialogue so that the distinct phases in life are duly valued and the potential contributions can come to bear fruit. Thank you very much for your attention.